when we have our time for questions. If you could, and you have now been handed 5 questions that you may already be planning to address in your presentation. To the degree that you don't or want to amplify, you could do that at the end.
All right.
And if you try to leave us, if you could leave us 10 or 15 minutes at the end, we could squeeze in some questions from each one of the TRC members. Thank you. Please proceed and welcome.
Terrific. Thank you, Jim. Good morning. I'm Victor Dover, principal in charge at Dover, Kohl & Partners, and I'll be the lead principal on this project. I have to give you a little disclaimer at the beginning. I'm not 100%. I was determined not to miss this meeting, but I had to check myself out of the hospital to do it. Oh. So I'm going to do a little wobbly intro here and then sit down and let Jason, Liz, and some others do that. I'm absolutely confident doing that because we've all worked together for so long that we tend to finish one another's sentences anyway. And I'm grateful for that fact since this came up unexpectedly. When we heard that Southeast Florida would be lucky enough to win a chance to do this for ourselves, this important regional plan, regional vision and blueprint, what we thought to ourselves was, wouldn't it be great if you didn't have to choose between teams that have the best expertise or teams that have the best local knowledge? And that's what we can do. You know, our team is basically the team that will not be scratching its head and wondering what you're talking about if someone says Burt Harris Property Rights Act or Lake Okeechobee or Towns, Villages, and Countryside Ordinance or Eastward Ho or Hobe Sound Water Company or South Dade Busway or something like that. Our team knows those things. But at the same time, our team is a group of people who have been at the front end of reforming, planning, and thinking about sustainable regions for a long time. The group that others write books about, and in many cases, the people on our team, like Bob and like Andres and Liz, wrote the books. And so we think that you'll have a chance to see all that in action in this project, and I'll ask Andres to explain how we got here with the team that we have.
Thank you. Good morning. This was Victor's role, but I will actually do it with my own emphasis. If I'm a little wobbly on the names, that's one of the reasons. So I'll be looking at notes. But basically, this is the document that actually led to the study that's about to be presented, and we of course know the document. We know what the issues are. We don't want to repeat the issues. The point we'd like to make next is that if that's the project to be done, I am next. Is it this one? This is the team to do it, and we want to explain why. Victor and I and Liz, to a great extent, and Joe also, spent a lot of time designing the team, and we're very proud of the design of this team. If we had longer, I'd give you detail. Now, not everyone will be able to speak, so I'm going to introduce some of the people who will not be speaking and emphasize why they're there, and that it isn't just an agglomeration. It's actually a very refined group of people. There's of course Dover Kohl and Dwayne Platter-Zeeberg taking the lead at different times. One detail: both of our firms, of course, have been here collectively for thousands of years, and human years, that is. But we also have a capacity to speak Spanish and, in my case, French. And I know that the Creole population is the 3rd largest, and we have certainly worked in Haiti and elsewhere pretty successfully that way. So there'll be principals that can actually speak both Spanish and French. I think the most important member of the team, at least in my opinion, is Elliot Allen of Criterion, and he will present what he does. But what most interests me about him, and I've been a great fan, first of all, we've worked together, both of us, for I don't know whether a dozen years, is the detail in which he does the work. It's a very finely grained work, which then is followed by Robert Burchell, who wrote the book, The Cost of Sprawl. I'll hold it up, because it is such a memorable cover that I'm sure it's the gray book. But basically he defined the field, the cost of sprawl. And what is important is not only the understanding that the urban pattern actually has economic implications, but the detail in which he works. This isn't a single region. It's a very varied region. There are poor communities in the Everglades and exceedingly rich communities in the front. You cannot just give a single number and say this is the carbon loading. And what Robert does, he presents the numbers at the level of the municipality so that the elected officials can make decisions. So it's at the level of the county, at the level of municipality, not quite at the level of the street, although he assured us it was capable of doing that. But you can act on it politically when you do your economics at that level. Now at the same time, and this is related, Brookings Institution, Brookings is the great think tank that actually partially is known for the physical work. But remember that we're a region that doesn't necessarily just face to Washington for our economics. We also face south. It's a worldwide region, and they would know what's happening in Brazil, et cetera. You know, it isn't just, so many of these projects are just about getting Washington funding, and that actually may easily be winding down. But we also have Latin America. TOD strategies, obviously the economics of that is very important, but Cardno, I want to point out, these are people, large engineering firm consisting of actually a firm of scientists, and in particular expertise with Sharon Nizef has expertise on the coastal, you know, the water, the rise, and also the Everglades simultaneously, and both systems work together. So that's the kind of scientists we have, as well, of course, as brownfield development, which is there's going to be a lot of. HDR, I'd like to point out, HDR is a firm that is one of the largest engineering firms in the world, 8,000 employees, 180 offices, and I know there are firms larger than this one, but the thing about this one is they have offices in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Palm Beach, and they're involved in all instances in each of those places in maritime, transit, aviation, freight railways, and highways. They coordinate and they already have the statistics. They know what's happening in transportation at every level in these 3 counties. So it isn't just about size, it's the precision. CrowdBright won't be here. One of the discussions that we had is how do you communicate with people, some of which are very young, tech savvy, and some of which are people that perhaps don't even read newspapers, and they actually need to be addressed by video with people standing and say, this is what it's like. This is, you know, they recognize a television set. What CrowdBright does is they take all the information and they process it into one place. So instead of having a bunch of chits of paper and just the fact that we had this meeting in the Everglades about, you know, what did they say, what is so impressive about this system is that it all lands together and is immediately correlated and then becomes accessible. So it isn't just a mess. We're able to use this stuff. Public outreach, we have somebody who was a mayor. Public outreach, well, he'll actually be leading the rest of this, but mayor for 24 years. So very much municipal know-how. A couple of others, Gorman Associates. That's a person that actually builds nationally a great deal of affordable housing. It isn't just theory. He knows where the money is, he knows where the money is not, and he knows where it's going to disappear. We've worked with them, and they're a think tank that actually builds a great deal of first-rate affordable housing, and you'll see some of it in Florida. So we wanted a practitioner when it comes to affordable housing. Whole planning and engineering, I think you all know, from Tallahassee. Spikowski, one of the most, I think, legal savvy of the planners of Florida. He overlooks our plans to make them real. He overlooks our codes to make them real. He's from the west coast of Florida. And I want to emphasize also Municipal Code Corporation, which at least I'm terribly excited about having. These are people who, it's the largest such company in the world by a long shot. They have 3,500 open accounts in which they manage the codes. And remember, the codes is where all this hits the ground. It's where the rubber hits the road. It's where the plan becomes real and effective. They're managing 3,500 accounts, including 52 Florida counties. So when the time comes to have this method plug into subsequent systems, you know, in subsidiarity, so it becomes local code, we have, and if you haven't seen their latest interactive, very modern looking codes and materials, they're right here in Florida. And again, what I'll show you is, I have a few minutes later, is to show how after this project is done, what happens next. That's always the problem with regional planning. And we do have a great deal that happens next that we know about. Jason.
This is Jason King, project director in our office, one of the senior most people, and we work very closely together. In fact, our desks are 5 steps apart. So you'll be seeing both of us on a constant basis throughout the duration of the plan.
So I'm very lucky to be the project director for a very large, multidisciplinary, very talented team of people I'm very honored to work with. And Victor's desk is right next to mine, and Andreas's office is just down the street, so we get to rely on all of them. I was a senior planner in the Florida Keys in Monroe County for about 2 years, and for the last 5 years I've been heading some of Dover Kohl's largest projects. Now, if we take a look at the 7 different counties, right, and we start to think about what kind of planning we want out of this project, and if we focus in on just 2, I want to show you some of the things that we've been thinking about, that we've been doing as citizen planners, pro bono work for our surrounding area to sort of help the thinking in that area, and to kind of set a standard for the modeling and for the scenario planning that we're looking for. And of course, we start with an inventory of the existing conditions, the airports and the seaports, which are so much more than just transportation mechanisms, but are also massive engines of economic opportunity. We know that the airports in Miami and Fort Lauderdale connect to more cities in Latin America and South America and the Caribbean than any other area. So we're very much, in some ways, the nickname, the capital of South America. And we know that the seaports are prepping now. They're widening as the Panama Canal gets larger and the super tankers are headed our way. And just as those are very obvious systems of economic generation, we have to also think of the other transportation systems, like the Metro Rail and the BRT investments that have been made in the Miami-Dade and the Broward area. And then we have to think further into the future about proposed passenger rail, about light streetcars and trolleys and express buses, and about the possibility of ferries. Likely Cuba will be opening in time, or the ferries that already could connect the communities of that area. And the reason I point this out is because so often regional planning fails to think specifically about places, right? We have an opportunity to actually draw routes along specific alignments. We actually know where the BRT areas or the TOD areas could be. And there's so many plans, like the plan in Utah that DPZ is working on private projects under, and there's almost no relevance, or the plan that we're working on in Louisiana. We do comprehensive plans in Louisiana, and we're having a hard time integrating the large-scale regional planning into the comprehensive plans. Often we're not even allowed to because graphics could be copyrighted. And it's just too important a time, it's too decisive a time right now for Southeast Florida for us to do the obvious. What's great, what people are looking for, I think, really, isn't as much, a great plan. It's sort of accepted that you're going to be getting that, but great places. And firms like DPZ working on Stewart, the terrific little turnaround. I mean, what better little community has revived itself in the last few years than Stewart working with DPZ's plan? Or in South Miami, where Dover Kohl's office is located, I get to take the train in every day to work. I get to meet my fiance for lunch at a little cafe at a real TOD, one that was built and constructed under a form-based code. Or that terrific plan that DPZ and Dover Kohl got together on, the downtown Kendall. I mean, talk about economic investment and jobs, all the different things that were just built there at such an incredible scale, maximizing the TODs. So we could talk about those processes, but looking around the room, most of you are in those charrettes and remember those. So let's talk about Fayetteville, Arkansas really quick, because more important than just the design, in some ways, is the public process. So in Fayetteville, Arkansas, we got people together, and they themselves were choosing where investment should be placed after we talked about how we reinvigorate places and how we protect the places that we care about. And we did the kind of regional plan that extended over many different jurisdictions, the kind that we're talking about here. Mapping the rivers and the floodplains and the natural features that are important, and also then figuring out how we can revive the traditional historic corridors and downtown areas and placing growth. Working with the public, taking their ideas because they know the areas very well, placing growth very gingerly in some places, and then, trying to put growth along the transit lines that we were showing before, and creating an overall strategy for the region. And I can tell you that even though the Fayetteville, Arkansas plan involves 10 municipalities, and it's 6 years old now, through one administration after another, from what we understand talking to them, our partners in Fayetteville, the regional plan is still the principal guiding document for development in that area. So, efficacy. Of course, it's more than these circles. In order to make this real for the average person, in order to build a coalition for regional planning, which is often so difficult to do, you need to make clear to them what it means to put down those circles in terms of revitalizing corridors, the spaces in between places, and in terms of making very careful decisions about where to preserve, about basically building densely in some areas, and by virtue of doing that, preserving others. Up in the northern part of southeast Florida, farmland, huge agricultural business, is still very much an important component to any regional planning. So these processes we've described, the one we're proposing, all start with a careful review of base information and documents, like the Southeast Florida 2060 plan, which we all got a chance to read in the last few weeks, refresh some of us on some of the great points. We learned a lot from that. Then comes the media blitz that comes right before a series of charrettes that we're proposing within the area. So that's websites, it's newsletters, it's town papers, it's interviews with our principals, with the media outlets, and it's also online conversations and a virtual town hall. Workshops and meetings throughout the whole of the region, throughout the 7 counties, and then the conversations that happen, at those tables and in those meetings with the MPO and with the regional planners and with stakeholders. That conversation continues working with CrowdBright's technology. Those same maps become digital and people start to post stick-it notes. Our project in El Paso, Texas currently has 35,000 hits. People continuing the conversation that was started as part of the regional process. And, CrowdBright has all kinds of things to engage people and to get get them in a conversation with people they might not get a chance to talk to face-to-face. Thank you.
Many years ago, when Treasure Coast was working on a strategic regional policy plan, Ramon Trias said to me that he thought the essential dilemma of regional plans and citywide plans was that for the constituents it was difficult to make it vivid. They didn't have the same level of connection to the work or to the policies that they have when the plan is about their own neighborhood. So we think a lot about the need to make it vivid and make it understandable at multiple scales. So you can think of the regional vision as, in a way, a mosaic of a great many different community types and places that we use as examples. And that requires zooming in and out, working small to show how the big policy idea can actually play out on someone's own street or neighborhood is how we make it vivid. So this mosaic idea comes up again and again in the work that we have been working on. And that's where I'd like to bring up Elliot to discuss how we integrate that with technology.
Hi, I'm Elliot.
My name is?
Yeah. My name is Elliot Allen. I'm a principal with Criterion Planners of Portland, Oregon. Pleasure to be here with you today. Going the right direction. My firm's role in the team is to provide the scenario planning software that'll be used by the practitioners on the team. The name of the software is Index. It's the oldest tool of its type in the country, been in use since the mid-90s, and as you can see in scanning the map there, been used in probably more regional planning processes than any other tool in the country, we're pleased to say. And I might add that under Secretary Murley's leadership in the 90s, it was selected by DCA for distribution to Florida's local governments. And it has since, in the last 12, 13 years, been distributed to a majority of the RPCs, several counties and cities throughout Florida. The intent of the software is to allow the participants in a planning process to spatially allocate growth, to visualize that growth in a variety of ways, make it interesting, engaging, as Victor just indicated, and then to evaluate those scenarios with a menu of indicators aimed at the kind of goals and policy objectives that the regional plan will embrace. This is a regional plan in Baltimore covering 7 counties that we just completed. Involve several thousand stakeholders in the process. And this is an example of where we not only try to visualize the built environment, the housing, the transportation, but also policy issues. So what you're looking at here are extrusions of greenhouse gas emissions. And they're actually portrayed here in the goals that were set across a transect of sectors for the 7 counties. Essentially a growing cooler framework, if you will. This is a project that all of the team members worked on in the Mississippi coast. It began right after Katrina. All of us went down there and spent about a week putting together a regional plan for all 3 counties and a dozen cities along the coast, transect based. And I'm pleased to say that we were just retained by the Regional Planning Commission there under their HUD grant. They were awarded a grant in the same cycle you were, and they're going to be employing Index now to drill down further to take this regional scheme and get in a little bit closer at the scales that Jason and Victor were mentioning. Some of the statistics about the software, as I said, it's in widespread use. We have over a couple hundred users in some 30-odd states, city and county planning departments, RPCs, a lot of MPOs. The tool dovetails with travel demand models in use by MPOs. What I want to call particular attention to is the tool's open source. So it's utterly transparent, no black boxes, which I think we'd all agree just isn't tenable in this day and age. And also importantly, it can be web served. We understand that you folks want to push deep and push out in your public engagement. And being able to deliver the scenario planning device over the web is enormously helpful for folks that can't get to the meetings in person and want to still engage with the scenarios and their ideas about what kind of form they might take. You've heard Jason and Victor mention about design and planning at different scales. This is one of the tool's strengths, and one of its distinctions is its ability to zoom in and out depending on the issue being involved, the constituents that are engaged, and the issues at hand. So at the highest level, up at a rasterized geography of cells, all the way down to census blocks and even parcels, in the case of your demonstration projects that we're proposing to model once the preferred vision is selected. This is a diagram of the tool's purposeful design to be comprehensive in its support from the very beginning of the process all the way through, and importantly, and again, here's a distinction for the tool, it's designed to monitor implementation. It's designed to issue an annual report card once this vision is out and rolling. A couple things I wanted to call your attention to. We proposed to put it to work on the second day of the project. A lot of software stays in the background until the shredding and the visioning begins. We want to put this out right at the beginning as an interactive digital atlas to begin to educate and draw participation into the process. It'll deliver a detailed strength and weakness analysis to inform the regional profiling at the outset. We intend to take advantage of the great work that FDOT and the MPOs have put into their travel modeling for the region. We understand there is a unified travel model now going out to 2035 that we would pivot from. So we want to take advantage of that interface. And lastly, and very importantly, major distinction in the tool is we leave it behind for the local planners. This is not a tool that consultants ride in and ride out with, but it's a tool that we will equip the local staffs with, train them, and put them in a position to act on the implementation measures that you've heard other team members describe. Huge asset in that regard. Here's a project we did in Florida a couple of years ago up in the Emerald Coast, the Panhandle. We've got 3 counties from Pensacola east and about a dozen cities. One of the tool's features, in addition to what I think you might have heard of paper chip exercises where citizens go up and place paper chips on papers, in addition to that, we also offer a digital Legoing, if you will, so that instead of paper exercises, people can use this electronically, again, either in person or over the web, kiosks, however you want to, whoops, excuse me, deploy the tool. Much more accurate in terms of the input that it collects, and again, engaging for the kind of diversity that you folks have. And then lastly, one of our most recent projects in your own region itself, up in Indian River County, we did some digital shredding up there, and this is an example of drilling down, if you can see on the development scheme there that we came up with, to the kind of detail that really makes a regional plan meaningful for the local folks.
Andreas wanted to cede his time so that we can get to Bob Burchell. But let me just make 2 points that he was going to make. And they're obvious ones. That the collective experience of these two teams is over 30 years and 50 projects within the study areas. And the value of that is that for once, for us, we don't have to be the out-of-town consultant that comes in and experiences wonderful things and changes everybody's life for a few months, you know? And with a process that kind of peaks with the visioning, and then kind of dies away like the New Year's resolution list that it's hard to find impetus for as you go along. For once, there's a chance here, if we do this right, that we can do the visioning, and then with the tools that we've described, and with our local commitment being people who live here, who have a house here, we can actually look forward to an implementation that actually can, you know, change the history of the area a little.
Bob Burchell from Rutgers University. One of the important things, and I think one of the things that you'll get from our team, is that we will not only look at scenarios at a very fine grain from bottom up, but we will place them within the economics and the way data are calculated and maintained from top down at the municipal, at the remainder of the county, and at the county level itself. So we'll take a look at this data and we'll make sure that Elliot's work informs us and we inform Elliot's work, and we will do an entire scenario testing from the top down in order to develop one fiscal impact number which relates to the success of sustainability. We will do 100 individual fiscal impact analyses at the local level. Very, very important is understanding how Florida grows and understanding your own state in terms of the way people look at it from outside. And regardless of the problems that you're having, which everybody else is having also, you're still a powerhouse. Florida has grown even over the decade from 2000 to 2010 at twice the percentage rate of the United States. One state, Florida, represents 10% of the growth of the United States. And the region that we're talking about represents close to a third of the growth of the state of Florida. And then finally, the 3 counties of the 7 that we talk about represent 85% of the projected growth of the region. These are important numbers. What it shows, and shows very importantly, is that this is not a planning exercise that'll be important for a new expanded South Florida region. This is important for the entire state. And essentially, what we're doing is in scenario testing, we're deriving alternative scenarios, and again, that's what Elliot does, and no one does it better. And again, he does it bottom up, and we do it top down. We generate differences between the scenarios because we try to keep development in the center, not beyond the western growth boundary, not necessarily on the coasts. And in addition to this, both Elliot keeps a report card and we keep a report card, and we score on the 6 livability principles. So at any point in time, you will be able to look at your livability principles and see how your sustainable development alternative is doing on those alternatives. And I'm not going to go into this in depth, but this is essentially taking all of our data that we know that we've used all over the United States and folding it within the 6 livability principles, and then putting a measure out that we would expect the sustainable development alternative to behave accordingly. And we deal with transportation and other infrastructure, minimizing the amount and the cost of that, emphasizing equity and affordable housing. How are we going to essentially bring that to the region and make sure it's stable within the region? Economic competitiveness, how does the region grow? How do we get development to areas within the region that are important to grow? How about existing community revitalization efforts? What degree of property valuation change? What degree of non-residential square feet? What degree of mixed-use development can we get into those areas? How is intergovernmental coordination going? Is this a process that gives us more information, more contacts with local officials, more contacts with officials above and below? And finally, as it relates to community uniqueness and livability, are we producing trips that add to air pollution? Are we increasing paved surfaces that essentially increases water pollution? How much land is lost for development? And again, these should all be lower in the sustainable development alternative. We will give you, when we finish, absolute and percentage changes in all of these variables at any point in time that you want to access them. We will look at cost savings related to sustainability, to the individual, to the community, and to society as a whole. And also we'll look at ways in which under sustainability you can stimulate the economy of the region that you're planning for. And one of the things that you're going to have to do, and one of the things that we have seen in areas where we have undertaken this scenario testing, you're going to have to shop for economic development. You are going to have to internationally shop for economic development. Commonality in language. The state of New Mexico and Albuquerque area goes to Spain to see if they want to have a U.S. presence. So it's no longer responding to people who are in the area. It's no longer pointing your name or putting your name on a water tank. It's actually shopping for economic development where you think that development can come in. And then finally, regardless of the livability principles, the important thing from a societal point of view is to see what we do as it relates to the carbon footprint. And essentially, we will look at that. What are the measures that the localities do and try to encourage? Is that communicated to its citizenry in terms of their measures? And how does all of this relate to a reduced carbon footprint in the general area? Thank you.
Liz?
Good morning. So before we move into the questions and answers, which Clarence Anthony will manage for the team, I thought I would just point to the criteria that you asked us to speak to and just review that we have a team that has been engaged in various permutations in the largest scale projects in various parts of the country. We have a tremendous amount of experience in South Florida, working with many of you on these objectives of sustainability. Always intensely working with public input in various manners, working with highly diverse communities throughout this part of Florida. As Andres said, multilingually quite often. Miami 21 was carried on in Spanish part of the time. And of course, much experience working together from the regional scale to the detail. And much of that working together ranges from the largest to even the smallest detail of designing the affordable housing that seems to be so elusive. So you can talk to many people in the region and in other parts of the world. We brought a lot of the books as a kind of reference to point to that we are indeed uniquely qualified to help make this vision happen and to continue to work on its implementation. Clarence?
You know, Clarence, before you take it, can I just add a seventh one? It wasn't on your list, and I wouldn't presume to rewrite your scorecard. But if I were doing the job you're being asked to do, I'd also look for a seventh thing, which is what team will work with you and build a relationship with you. The reality of a project like the one you're undertaking that lasts multiple years is that things will come up that we don't expect now. There'll have to be problems solved along the way. And I think I'm accurate in saying that in our experience working together, this team is accustomed to doing that, to dealing with what comes up and being the we can work with you team. And personally, this will be the most important thing I get to touch for the next 3 or 4 years. So so it is important. It's all these nice people's work. It's also a piece of my work, and I'm going to take it that seriously and be there every minute.
Good afternoon. I'm Clarence Anthony with Emerge Consulting. President is Tammy over here. And one of the things that I'm honored to do here today is facilitate this question and answer part and play Oprah since she's retired. I won't cry. But what I want to also accentuate is Emerge has worked in this community in South Florida and Treasure Coast region since 1996 doing public outreach in underserved communities. We've worked in the Glades area with the GUA and other water management district, the school board. We work with Scripps in public outreach to underserved minority communities. And those techniques that we've talked about here today really are reaching the Generation X and those who are more affluent, who have access to laptops and understand computers. But the communities that we work in are those that we go right into the neighborhoods and people walk in there with their water bills and say that we've never, ever, they can't afford to pay their water rates in the Glades. We actually go to the churches, we go to the neighborhood groups, we go to the Black Chamber, the Hispanic Chamber, we work with the Palm Beach Chamber of Commerce. So we have that kind of experience, and the techniques that CrowdBright and layering the global outreach is wonderful. But this is an economic prosperity plan for South Florida. And we know that our team is able to look globally, but act locally. And so I hope that we made sure that point came across today as we look at an economic development plan that is going to utilize the HUD money. And we know that their goal is to make sure that they see what we did wrong so they can take some of the money back. Well, we've done that before, and we understand that, and we'll make sure we work at reaching those doors throughout the region. So what we want to do here is almost facilitate how we're going to actually facilitate some of the public meetings that we have. So we're going to ask you, do you have any questions? And I'll facilitate a few minutes, but I'll make sure the right person actually get you the answer that you ask. And if they don't, I'll ask them again to make sure they give you the right answer. So anybody, Randy, you seem like you.
Roman is where we start.
All right, okay.
We take turns here.
All right.
What we've been doing is just going down.
Okay.
But you can absolutely.
All right. Take over. No,
You normally do.
I do. They saw that yesterday in practice.
Thank you. This is a great opportunity to do something very good. And my greatest fear from the process from early on is not to do what we've done before. And my question is, how's your approach going to be different than some of the planning efforts of the past? What have you learned in the last 20 years or so? How are you gonna tell us something that is not going to be the same as we heard before?
I think that's a great question. And yesterday, that was part of our discussion. There was a heated debate yesterday in our workshop. And again, that's what you get. We don't agree even up here, but we fought through it. And I'll let Andres sort of share some of the thoughts. But our public outreach approach, we debated yesterday whether on a regional basis, do you still use some of those boards and flip charts? Can you do that? And I think, Andres, you have some opinions on that you may want to share.
By the way, I'm not simultaneously doing something else. This is Darren Dismore from Cloud Bright here, just in case you have a question for him. I think that regional planning in particular, at the policy level, there are rare disagreements. It always comes out that the growth should be here, and the policies are exceptional, good education for everybody, except, it's the old Florida Comprehensive Plan. Where we think failure occurs is something that actually I've been studying for 5 years, which is subsidiarity. Who makes decisions when? We also set up systems by which the correct level of decision-making is empowered to make the decisions and given the tools, so it doesn't just stay on top. And because the national system is ever more legalistically codes, we're working towards having model codes, model standards, model methodologies, model protocols. And that's why Municode, which is at the very bottom of the list, and years from now, I think stands as a great difference between ours and the old way of doing things. It's the vertical coordination over time that I think has always failed.
Yeah, and Victor?
Generally failed.
Victor?
Jason quickly showed one of the maps that we did during the Climate Change Action Committee's work, and then compared that to a much more simplified spots and dots and bars map, and said, let's not oversimplify. What Andres is getting at is that if we want the regional vision and blueprint to be applied locally and made useful to people and actually bring about the change it envisions, then it has to be obvious how you plug in. It can't just be a vague blob on a map, a purple dot or something with no information behind it. Right? It can't be independent of the reality on the ground there, the topography. Oh, there's a bay under that dot. Sorry, that kind of thing. So therefore, that thing about working at the multiple scales is important, and working across the time scale, so that when we're done, there's an obvious way that the local governments can plug in, pick it up, and continue the work at the greater level of detail, just as Elliot described. There's a second thing I would like to say in answer to Ramon's question. We're always worried about inadvertently or accidentally fighting the last war, right? Once upon a time, there was no such thing as low-income housing tax credits or historic preservation tax credits or the concept of carbon tax or tax increment finance or industrial revenue bonds or on and on and on. All these instruments were thought up by smart people. And some of them are even being phased out or reaching a kind of peak or past their peak and may not even be available when we're ready to fight the battles of the upcoming challenges. And so we thought the very best thing to do, and this is the reason for the stunt with the chairs full of books, is to bring the people who will think up the things that are the equivalent for the next generation for the same goal. And continuing to utilize those things. But you're talking about the kind of people who thought it up when there was no such thing as a T&D or a TOD or a transect or what have you. And that makes me more confident about fighting the next war, not the last one.
And I think this is about economic development as well, this plan that we're talking about that is implementable. I know Michael Bush and I have just facilitated a workshop that the community itself was going crazy because the plan wasn't according to what they want and how they would like to have it implemented. This is an implementation plan and a jobs and economy plan. Okay.
Number one, just appreciate the detail the team went into with regard to the models that they're going to be using, the sort of the level of effort that's going to go into actually finding out where we are, where we want to go, and being able to measure it. I think that's something that we need to rely on, because what will happen if we don't have that kind of data, and I got an earful of it here from you, we're going to be looking at each other and say, how did we come up with that? And who said that? Those kinds of things. So off the subject of that, there is a very robust partnership that's been developed over the last it seems like years since we started with the application and things like that. And also the partnership made up of local governments, of private sector business, I think over 200 folks. And also out of that, there will be some work groups that in fact will be at hopefully the forums and the summits and give them an opportunity actually to get their hands and their brains around and into the plan that comes out. And I think that's one thing that will be very different. And I didn't hear the team really talk about how you're going to manage that, if there's some commitment that you will make to, you know, to be at every meeting and just basically how you're going to manage the partnership, and then also those work groups that will be, our hope here, at least my hope, is that we'll be very involved. So they take ownership of this plan. So it's not your plan, it's not the Regional Planning Council's plan. Those leaders emerge from those work groups and it's their plan. So they carry it forward after we retire.
Yeah, I think that's
so how are you going to do that?
I think that's very important, and that's why we think that public participation and public involvement from the local level, we have 2 former elected officials here that know the mayors, the city council members and city managers and planners from south all the way up to the Treasure Coast. But in regards to managing this herd of members to make sure we work and we leave a plan behind, we have a project manager. Jason, why don't you come up and talk to Mr.
And also the commitment that you're willing to stay with that group.
Okay, good question. Here you go.
That's right.
Need a little help there.
Within the SOQ was a long list of the tasks that you have, right? And the different people assigned to those tasks. And the tasks are assigned over the 3-year period that this could go. And there's a staffing commitment for every single one of those things and for all of the meetings that the consortium are going to be involved with. And the value of all these firms is there's a lot of people in our offices are everywhere, and we can attend those meetings. A lot of us are actually on those boards anyway, and some of us are consortium members. Back 4 years ago when this first proposal was being put together, we joined the consortium. The value of having a local team is that we really can catch that little meeting in Homestead, or that homeowners association meeting in Stewart. And while some of the principals might not want to be there for every Wednesday night, there's behind us, 100 planners who are very excited about working with guys like this and want to do all the work and want the apprenticeship in the public process. So behind us is a lot of other people who have a lot of energy to make every single one of those meetings and to build the local kind of leadership that those meetings can create.
And I think the other part of this, Paul, why don't you talk about the Public Institute, the training for the citizens as well as for elected officials, so that we leave this process behind for them to help implement as well.
Sure, thank you. Good afternoon, I'm Paul Vroman. I'm the former mayor of the town of Cutler Bay down in South Dade, not too far from Homestead. And also was the founding father, so to speak, of the downtown Kendall process and that charrette. I currently work for the University of Miami in the Division of Continuing Education, and what we're working on right now as part of this team is to put together a training process for local elected officials on planning and zoning. I know that from my 10 years of experience in that process, after recently seeing one of the charrettes that I worked on in my former life with Treasure Coast, just recently passed 14 variances to put a Walmart right in the middle of the charrette. Sorry, Marcella. Oops. I cried on that one. But the problem is that legacy didn't continue of the ownership of that process and the understanding of how to make those changes. There was no training involved for those people. So it will be a very hands-on, accessible training process for not only low-level elected officials who are making these decisions, but also community activists, so that it reaches out so that the stakeholders who live within the communities understand the differences on what density means and where it belongs and how smart growth patterns should work.
Okay.
The consortium members are a great source of educators for others. So we would like to see the consortium as a great 200-member group that's been deputized to speak for the plan, teach about the plan, and contribute to the plan, not just attend meetings.
Okay, I'm gonna try to push us right on. Randy?
As an engineer in training, but having been beaten over the head by some of the very books over there in those shelves by all the planners, I still tend to keep a little bit of a pragmatic viewpoint. So looking at the infrastructure that's here in place today and is planned in the future, is that, do you see that, what is the role do you see for that in creating the plan as a driving force or as a limiting factor?
Okay. Rick, you want to handle that for us?
Thank you. This is in part response to Ramon's question of what's going to be different this time also. We've been working diligently at the local, state, and even the national level to get walkability, bikeability, and transit, the three forgotten modes, into the mix, and they will be this time. We were successful with ITE in getting the ITE CNU designing walkable urban thoroughfares recommended practice adopted about a year ago. So we will bring those tools and our detailed knowledge. I was on the technical review committee for that document. We went to Washington and worked it out. But Randy, the roadway systems that are in existence now, Military Trail all the way down US 1, need to respond to the vision for land development patterns, the scale of development that can vary as you move along those roadway corridors. And the corridor operations can be kept at their highest maximum capacity for motor vehicles, but they'll just have to behave in places that you and the citizens tell us they want great walkability. And so we know how, if you tell us where you want it, then we can give very clear direction on how to achieve that walkability. So those principles are there, and we'll bring those to this project.
In addition, Randy, we do have an engineering firm partnered with us because we knew that would be important from HDR. Will, you want to share some thoughts?
Sure. Thank you. One of the very positive things that we bring to this team, HDR has been doing transportation work in Florida for 40 years. Since 1999, we've been doing transportation work for cities, counties, Tri-Rail, and of course FDOT in South Florida. In the past 3 or 4 years, we've been working with seaports and aviation as well. And in Florida in general, we've worked with FEC and CSX for over 20 years. So I've been involved with HDR. I've been with HDR as vice president, overseeing our transportation program for 10 years. And I've been fortunate enough to work on Tri-Rail double tracking. We did program management and final design work for segments 3, 4, and 5. So that was obviously Palm Beach to downtown Miami to the airport. We also have worked for FDOT from Vero Beach to the Keys. The institutional knowledge, the relationships, the understanding of the players, the decision makers, where the data is, what the infrastructure is today is 100% is bread and butter for us as far as the skill set we bring to this team. So there's no learning curve to understanding the total multimodal transportation.
Okay. Jim, Ms. Merlin?
When the partnership came together and responded to the HUD application process, we put together an application that we thought we knew where the world was headed. And we created a model that looked like standard Florida state, regional, local planning. And we won. We got one of the 45. 3 months later, the world we thought we knew was different. And the title of the plan is now an Economic Prosperity Plan. And since we renamed it, the unemployment's gone up, the value of our houses have gone down, and more importantly, the institutions that we thought we understood that we would be working with no longer exist. How will this team help us work with the Department of Economic Opportunity in Tallahassee and all that has gone into the change that is inherent in that new title?
I agree with you 100%. And again, as a part of the development of this presentation, those were the types of debates we had. And again, this is a great team with great minds. And we agree that this plan, this vision that we're creating is a vision based upon the backdrop of the economy, economic development, job creation, and creating a real vision for Florida that's not just based upon tourism, but based upon putting together the entire pieces of the puzzle. So I know, Victor, you kind of started that earlier.
It just seems to me that what's happened to us is that while the instruments will be different and the level of state entanglement in the decisions made at the regional and local level will be different, that just means that we have an opportunity to shape a better pattern. That we all worked within the system as it existed before, and the message that has come down from the new administration is that decisions will be made much more locally, and the focus is on money and jobs and economic success. That doesn't change our original responsibility, because all of those other projects we were doing at the smaller scale or the mid-level scale that were making their way up to Tallahassee and back with oversight and interaction with DCA, we're still being done with the ingredients or the recipe that was spelled out by the local government desires and wishes. So I think our challenge now is to do two things. One is to express local desires. And what's interesting to me about this plan is that I know from experience how different western St. Lucie County is from South Dade, or how different West Palm Beach is from the city of Miami. So we know that the responses in the regional vision are not going to be uniform from one part of the region to the other. They need to be locally driven. And they are simply being told, first, you have much more latitude than you used to have to decide what's important to you locally. We can express that in the plan. Second, the other regions are going to be looking at us, partly because we are going to accept so much of the responsibility for growth, as Bob forecast a few minutes ago, but also because you're out in front as one of the regions that got the money to do this. We should be able to, with this team, we should be able to put together a state-of-the-art project that becomes the national bell cow. It won't be just repeating a process that's been done several other times, but we'll be setting out a new template that the other regions can follow.
Okay, thank you, Victor. Liz?
You know, there are really two aspects to the point that you brought up. One has to do with the agencies and the relationship of the region to state government, and also as well to the national. And the other was economic activity in this region, as well as the whole state. You know, what happened to the DCA, I think, in a sense, could be seen optimistically in light of Andres's use of the word subsidiarity. It's, in essence, asking this region to work on itself, perhaps with less interference, but really to take the lead and say, there's nobody else who's going to be telling us what to do. We've got to do it here. And one of the things we've been thinking and talking about is, in order to keep that implementation curve going, whether there isn't worth thinking about this, whether it's the consortium, the two regional planning councils that have got together that have less support than they used to before, into some longer term picture, whether it's like the RPA, the regional plan in the New York area, relationships with non-for-profits and so on, but some longer term way of dealing with regional issues. I think the climate change activities that we've undertaken have allowed us to see that crossing the lines across counties really is important and effective. And moving into the issue of the economy, I think there have been efforts made to get the chambers of commerce together to, maybe this is an opportunity to get the ports speaking together about being a regional competitor that's global rather than competing with each other. I think there are lots of opportunities like that the door is open to, because the old way is broken. And I think that's one of the most exciting opportunities, but from that perspective of a new day, new ways of thinking about jobs and our global connections.
Okay. Any?
Try, go back down.
Okay.
Hi.
Julia, get your mic.
Oh, sorry. I think it's low. I think it's close enough now.
when you're talking a horizon that is as long as this project is, things like sea level rise will could become a very real thing here. And my question is, how does the index modeling and the scenario modeling, how does that handle those kind of long-term environmental consequences, either the positive impacts of hopefully Everglades restoration being finished, or the negative impacts of sea level rise, or other things we haven't yet thought of?
Ellie? Terry, you were sharing, Sandra? Oh, yes, yes. How does your model, Elliot, accommodate?
What the model is going to take into account is the geography of those changes. So, and I was asking for my colleagues from Cardno to weigh in on this. We're going to get information from them based on their modeling of climate change, sea level rise. And that's going to be translated into a geographic encroachment footprint, if you will. Essentially, it's going to boil down to areas that are taken off the table and that aren't going to be available, at least to the extent that we might have thought originally, for growth. So there'll be a spatial recognition of that kind of a trend.
Hi, I'm Cassandra Thomas. I'm the ecologist, and I study sea level rise and Everglades restoration. So I got both sides of the picture going on. But basically what I can provide into the model is the data as far as rate and elevational changes, landscape response, how what used to be an open area is starting to turn into a marsh area, and things of that nature. So I'll be able to predict out into the future based on current trends, provide that data, how the landscape will change if it's allowed to change, as opposed to putting up a break wall or something along those lines where you stop, at least temporarily, you stop any negative effects of sea level rise. And through that, I'll be able to work very closely with them to put that data into his model, and hopefully we can come up with some realistic scenarios about ways to either let the migration of the marshlands up into upland areas as it would normally go without human beings there, or do we put up a break wall and fight the erosional process?
And you're located in the Cardinal Entrix Wellington office?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Lois Bush with the Florida Department of Transportation. If you could clarify for me, it sounds like there are two scenario planning processes, one focused on economic and one focused on index. Did I understand that correctly? And then how ultimately will they link up?
You want to start?
Yes, and again, the two processes inform each other. The two processes use the same level of projections. Elliot might look at it at a more micro level. We'll look at it at the jurisdictional level, the community base, the rest of county, and the county level.
You mentioned county, and when we're talking about a 7-county region and in regional economics, is it limited to a county look, or are you looking at how regionally and sub-regionally economics work?
No, but at one point you look in terms of the projections as it relates to the sustainable development alternative. Is that going to mean a difference in changes over trend in terms of what the county would get in terms of population, households, and employment? So it's not just distribution within the county to the more developed areas, accepting what the overall population, employment, and household projection is, but rather are decisions going to be made in terms of this particular group of counties growing more and this particular growing less.
Yes, sir.
How many team members are locally based?
Within the region?
Within the region? Yes, within the region.
Within the region.
There is no Bob Burchell in South Florida, so we had to go to New Jersey. Get him. There is no Anthony Downs or Chris Lineberger, Brookings Institution here, so we had to go to Washington, Michigan to get them. But running down the list, Criterion is in Portland, but they operate all over the country, as you know, and have a unique Florida experience. We also, you don't even think about them being somewhere else because we're always on the phone with them. We're always back and forth. Elliot and I work closely together on lead for neighborhood development. Andrew, Georgiadis, and Elliot's team work closely together on the curriculum for
All right,
training.
Victor, I'm
people
a
in that.
facilitate. Just go ahead.
So it's, they're not in our time zone, but we feel like they are because they work as late as we do.
Okay.
And then as you go down the list, strategic economics is based in the Bay Area, but they have a unique TOD experience. Cardno is here. Cardno TBE is Tampa Bay Engineering. They're a Florida firm with this extra expertise, and certainly office here in our region. HDR is here. Hall Planning is in Tallahassee. CrowdBright is out of town. Gorman operates in the Florida Keys and in Wisconsin, so they have a multi-office location. They live in South Florida. Yeah. Emerge is Clarence, right here. Spakowski is Fort Myers. MCC, Florida-based, and Paul from the University of Miami.
Dover Kohl.
We're in Coral Gables.
Coral Gables.
We're actually in the park of downtown Coral Gables. That is actually part of South Miami, though.
Right. Now,
And it ain't easy to find their office.
you showed a couple of models there that obviously the experiences that you show from other parts of the country. This southeast region is very diverse. We have rural, we have urban, we have white, we have black, we have rich, we have poor, and anything else in between. So your market trends are going to speak to an idea or a proposal, an approach. So one question is, as you start looking at doing these community engagements, and you have people that talk about what they want, but the trend talks about something else, and the politician is engaged with, if you want to call it special interest or whatever it is, influences, then how do you merge that as it relates to one, implementation, and then growth from that, developing a sustainable growth pattern that crosses sections of different communities?
I think that's an excellent question, and I will tell you that every planning process and every study has to balance those different stakeholders because, again, the debate yesterday in our group, and again, that's what we do, we talk about the fact that the professionals design a vision, but the community has to have input and in some way not always agree 100% with the plan, but they do have to accept the vision. If they don't accept the vision, as a former mayor, I can tell you that the elected officials will not, some will not adopt the plan. Some will force the plan. So what we have talked about is how do we create a regional visioning charrette process throughout the region in urban, wealthy, poor, in Hispanic communities using language just from different regions, Haitian community, the Glades area, which I'm very familiar with, and throughout the entire region. How do we develop a plan that is regional, economically driven, but also has pilots that are local? And we think we have an approach to be able to do that because we've done it before. We've worked in the wealthy communities, but we've also worked in the rural communities that are impoverished.
I was looking for, maybe someone else could talk about it, because you talked about your codes and how someone on your team has experience with municipal codes. But I didn't hear anything about policy.
Okay.
And I think policy is very important when you impact communities.
Yes. Who wants to cover that? Liz?
You know, I think that perhaps some of the experience we had working on the code for the city of Miami might speak to that, because we were dealing with communities that were, where individuals were worried about paying the insurance on the one hand, and on the other hand, the high-stakes business development side of town. And I think one of the things we would look forward to is tailoring a process that could speak to that diversity of conditions. Every plan, whenever you set out to plan, is a plan of conservation and development. And in some cases, it's about conserving not only natural resources, but the resources of the communities, what people have in terms of housing and their place in the community. While on the other hand, you're trying to spur development and enable economic development to grow. And I think we could never say that we've got the answer about how to do that across the region without interacting with the regional planning councils and the people who put this whole process together to tailor that. But I think that within this team, you see the experience ranging from one extreme to the other, and that we're confident we can bring that together.
Well, on behalf of the team, thank you all so much. We are the local team with the international credentials. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.